A dragonfly's first adult moments. One of the fantastic transformations in a pond's spring awakening. It's a time for salamander courtship, when apparently inanimate specks of jelly suddenly reveal perfectly formed embryonic snails, already quickening with life. The water fills with single cells functioning as complete animals. And everywhere, hungry jaws. The winner will grow into a diving beetle. The loser would have become a frog in the race to populate a pond each spring. A straggling line of last year's bulrushes, the only sign of a pond closed down by winter. But even now, there is life. Near winter's end, food supplies are low, especially for creatures with a constant body temperature to maintain. Down below, the silent remnants of aquatic multitudes lie buried in the mud or form mute clusters around dead, waterlogged vegetation. Most of them are adapted to withstand the cold. But beneath the ice and snow, there is another crucial problem. All winter long, decay bacteria have been at work, feeding on the leftovers of the previous season, breaking down organic materials into reusable chemicals. And in the process, hour after hour, the bacteria have slowly been using up the oxygen dissolved in the water, threatening to stifle what little activity there is. Many of the one-celled animals have lasted out the winter in thick-walled, cold-resistant cysts, in a long dormancy that reduces to a minimum their needs for nourishment or oxygen. But whether torpid protozoa or tiny, active crustaceans heavy with eggs, none of the pond creatures can survive indefinitely without oxygen. Just in time, the melt begins. Primitive insects called springtails or snow fleas are among the first to hatch. Melting ice pours fresh, oxygen-rich water into the pond and ends the long pause imposed by winter. Multiplying copepods, cyclops, are joined by a damselfly nymph emerging from the bottom debris to renew its growth. One-celled bacteria eaters are back in business, and spring populations begin their sudden upsurge. Overwintering eggs hatch, and inside these cysts formed last fall, the protozoa begin to become active. Soon more and more will emerge into the water. There is a quickening of response to changes in temperature and chemical concentrations. The plant world, too, begins to bloom, with microscopic algae multiplying and spreading, coloring the water with new growth. The first reeds break through to replace the bleached remainders from last fall. Spring arrivals use color and sound to proclaim their presence. There are unseen arrivals at the water's edge. The feet of visiting birds may carry seeds, spores, eggs or cysts, any of the tiny capsules that can spew numbers into the water. Fresh from their muddy winter dens, a pair of leopard frogs prepare to mate. The female's response to a clasping male is an acceleration of the final development of eggs in her ovaries. The two remain for hours, sometimes days, waiting. Finally, the eggs emerge, and they're immediately fertilized by an invisible cloud of sperm released from the male's body. The fertilized eggs come to rest dark side up, to disappear in the shadows if viewed from above, or to be lost in the bright reflections from the water's surface if seen from below. Within hours, one cell becomes two. Two divide into four. Soon a multicellular mulberry shape is formed. With further development, a groove along the back becomes the beginning of the nervous system. The wonder of the genetic code is evident, as a single cell is transformed into a complex, fully functional creature, one that repeats in its embryonic unfolding the evolution of its kind. Finally, a new individual emerges from the egg, a tadpole. Prodigious numbers from every fertile female, the frog's way of replacing itself in a world filled with predators. Whatever their origin or their diet, pond animals ultimately rely on food substances produced by plants. Every leaf, a carbohydrate factory. In every green cell, the vital pigment, chlorophyll. To trap the sun's energy and make it available as chemical energy, to be passed down every food chain in the pond. In countless cells, living protoplasm streams packaged chlorophyll around cellulose walls, a sun-powered assembly line, turning out complex chemicals, the basis of the pond's fantastic spring boom in productivity. Hollow globes of volvox colonies, fragile mucus-covered filaments of greenery, all proliferating in growing swarms of bacteria. The spring runoff floods the pond with organic material to nourish an incredible growth of microscopic plants, a silent explosion that will reverberate throughout the growing season and that will help keep the pond alive. sparse winter populations of copepods suddenly increase to feed on the algae, their delicate crustacean bodies growing on the green abundance that surrounds them. A diet of aquatic animals may help transform this tiny mandibulate monster into an adult beetle. Another crustacean, the water flea Daphnia, briefly dominates the silent explosion of numbers. The spring population is exclusively female. Every individual can reproduce without benefit of male fertilization. The infant participants in this virgin birth cluster in a brood chamber just under the back of each adult's bulging translucent carapace, clear enough to display the Daphnia's internal structure, including a digestive tract filled with green algae and blood tinted orange by the pigment hemoglobin. The baby Daphnia have grown thus far on egg yolk and a special substance secreted into the brood chamber from the mother's body. Now, barely larger than some of their one-celled neighbors, these tiny females are ready to enter the food-filled waters. The crystalline carapace reveals both the maternal heartbeat and another live birth. This fragile miniature replica of its virgin mother will in turn add to the population explosion in just the same way. Some young in the brood pouch already contain the eggs that will produce yet another generation. Marine Daphnia go through a free-swimming larval stage in their development. But these freshwater creatures have an abbreviated life cycle, an adaptation to the temporary bounty of spring food supplies, a shortcut to explosive population growth. The new crustacean hordes are soon joined by crowds of mosquito larvae, also exploiting the sudden profusion of plants. Each wriggler must make a regular retreat from the bottom of the crowded shallows to renew its air supply at the surface. In quieter waters, a phantom midge larva drifts in search of tiny crustacean victims, its buoyancy adjusted by two pairs of permanent bubbles that glisten darkly in its body. And the population booms continue. Predatory hydra multiply to take advantage of water flea abundance as the silent explosion continues to echo through the pond. At some times of year, swellings on the body produce male and female cells for sexual reproduction. But in the rush to exploit spring resources, hydra increase their number by budding. One or more new individuals simply begin to sprout from the body of another. Like the Daphnia it feeds on, the hydra takes the shortest possible route to multiplication. Two stick-like insects, hungry water scorpions, have flown to the pond. They feed on the multitudes and engage in mock battle. An aquatic damselfly nymph will soon mature and leave the lush green world of water, home of the ubiquitous mite, a spider relative. The darker depths of the pond are the setting for another boom. Shimmering clouds of bacteria, teeming, uncountable, and usually unseen, flourishing on the organic buildup brought by runoff and general population growth. Bacteria in turn support other microscopic populations, especially the one-celled protozoan hordes that constantly thrash a living from the invisible crowds in the water. Filter feeders strain the bacterial broth, rotifers, and the single-celled stentor. The protozoa join the population race. One cell may simply split to create two new individuals with identical genetic makeup, with an occasional pairing to exchange genetic material and keep the dividing stock vigorous. The protozoa help keep their own numbers under control. Large bursaria sail through crowds of paramecium, scooping their slipper-shaped prey into spacious gullets, where the captured victims swim, even while being digested. Soon the water is thick with protozoa, mobile crowds, or sedentary colonies. At every level of size, there is unceasing activity, feeding, and growth. Even in the peaceful surroundings of the pond, there are appetites to be satisfied. And appetite is not always a respecter of kind. A bullfrog is on the prowl, with a leopard frog as its prey. Before long, this amphibian hunter itself may be threatened. A pond attracts hungry visitors. The basic rules of pond economy are simple. For every species, there is some other species acting to control its numbers. And for everything taken from the water, something is added. The raccoon has removed 1 frog's worth of pond substance, but may leave in its droppings a feast for unseen scavengers. Time brings many changes in a pond. One of the most mystifying involves certain insects. This underwater predator is superbly fitted for an aquatic life. And yet its pond water days come to an end. Early one morning, there is some inner signal, an urge to move upwards into the air. It will take the rest of the day to change this grotesque nymph into an adult dragonfly. In fact, most of the change has already happened. Cells and tissues have been rearranging themselves according to a genetic plan. And now the result is about to emerge. With great effort, the soft, moist legs of a new adult have been pulled free to harden in the air. Now the effort must be renewed to withdraw a lengthening abdomen from the dull husk of the nymph. Wings like crumpled plastic begin to expand as blood is pumped from the body into a delicate tracery of veins. The wings too will harden to make the dragonfly one of the swiftest, surest flyers in the insect world. The transformation is complete. And now the cycle can begin again as this creature of the air seeks out a mate. After mating, the male in front holds the female firmly by claspers at the rear of his body as she delicately dips the tip of her abdomen beneath the water's surface, depositing her fertilized eggs on aquatic vegetation. If she should get too wet and be held by the water, the male's strong grip can pull her free. These are the eggs. If laid early in summer, they will hatch into nymphs that will achieve adulthood that same season. But the eggs laid at summer's end will hatch out nymphs that will lie all winter, buried in the mud and biological debris at the bottom of the pond. There they will join all the other overwintering forms, the tough-shelled cysts, and the eggs that serve to help each spring and summer population extend itself through a time of barren cold. Autumn brings changes among the water fleas. With the appearance of male Daphnia in the population, the products of sexual reproduction appear. Thick-walled, overwintering eggs that will not hatch until spring. The pond populations are geared to the passage of time and the changing of the seasons. The rapid growth of spring gives way to an almost complete halt when winter closes in, and life lies waiting for the moment of the next silent explosion.